Hey Pilgrims, Pastor Craig, Horton Congregational Church. Well, Lori was showing me the other day this square that she has crocheted and asked me what I thought of it, if it was going to make a nice blanket, and I find it extremely beautiful. You can see there's still some strings. She's not finished that. But what I noticed here in this beautiful, beautiful square is this flower on this side, yet on the back side, really no design at all. And again, she hasn't totally finished it. I actually wanted to use it for this video in a somewhat unfinished manner so that you could see the front and the back, especially those of us who have any experience with crocheting, not that I do, but I see a lot of it because Lori does it, know that the pattern is typically, very typically, only on one side and the back is not finished in that manner. It reminded me of a poem that I've read over the years, seen over the years by Corrie ten Boom. I've got it up here on my Chromebook because I want to read it to you. It says this, it says, "My life is but a weaving between my God and me. I cannot choose the colors, he weaveth steadily. Oft times he weaveth sorrow, and I in foolish pride forget he sees the upper, and I the underside. Not till the loom is silent and the shuttles cease to fly will God unroll the canvas and reveal the reason why. The dark threads are as needful in the weaver's skillful hand as the threads of gold and silver in the pattern he has planned. He knows, he loves, he cares. Nothing this truth can dim. He gives the very best to those who leave the choice to him." And thank you, Corrie ten Boom, for a beautiful, beautiful poem for us to consider and think about. I'm in a section on that study of Thomas Oden's The Teachings of John Wesley, where he talks about the imperfection of human knowledge and the fact that we view things from a very small sliver of time and a very small sliver of geography and a very small sliver of existence, and that our knowledge and our wisdom and our insight is extremely imperfect and unknowing compared to our great and wonderful God. We talked several weeks ago about the fact that God, being not limited by time, has so much broader, infinite perspective than we do. You know, as a couple of examples of the limit of human knowledge, just things that I saw in MLive over the last couple of days. That's an online version of the Jackson Citizen Patriot and other Booth newspapers and that kind of thing. MLive had an article, for instance, just this morning on folks over on the west side of the state that have been encouraged to plant lupine in order to help with the existence of an endangered butterfly over there, and yet most nurseries sell a genus of lupine that ends up starving their caterpillars to death. They, somewhat like monarchs who can only lay on milkweed, we talked about that a week or two ago. These butterflies only lay their eggs on lupine, yet these kinds that are being sold by some nurseries, the caterpillars will not eat, and they die from starvation. And this issue that if we don't have full knowledge of what it is that we're doing, how that ramification is on that endangered butterfly. Similarly, there have been a series of articles on MLive on the Kirtland's warbler, kind of dear and dear to those of us in Michigan, as we're one of the last bastions of that and have gone through over the last 20, 30 years phenomenal efforts to try and save that species of songbird. And jack pines are planted in what they call a weave pattern that has branches low enough for those Kirtland warblers to nest in, and yet has open areas that are supposed to support native plants and insects that also serve for their food. And what they've discovered in that weave pattern, which, by the way, you can see very specifically if you go out on Google Maps, look at north of Atlanta, Michigan, several miles between Clear Lake and Tomahawk Creek impoundment or flooding, you can see those patterns even just looking at Google Maps. And those patterns, though, have proven themselves extremely ineffective in those open areas. Yes, the level of Kirtland warbler nesting pairs went up phenomenally, but now it's starting to drop back down as they realize that that weave pattern is not replicating the natural habitat that occurs with periodic burning that would happen historically, either by lightning strikes or indigenous peoples starting fires. Anyhow, those things that we have this imperfect knowledge, you know, Paul writes about it we find it 1 Corinthians 13. The love chapter, as we talk about, he says at one point, he says, "Now I see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face." This study by Thomas Oden of John Wesley's teachings talks about the fact that intrinsic within us is a desire to get more and more knowledge all the time, and yet no matter how much knowledge we accumulate here on this earth, it's still very, very limited based on, like I started the video with, those slivers of time. He also writes about it in Romans 11, where Paul does, whereas he's quoting Job 11. And he says, how inscrutable, how unsearchable is the wisdom of God, meaning we can never attain it. But this fact that we have within us a desire to attain it, according to this study of Thomas Oden, says that implicates that eventually we will attain it in eternity as we spend that in heaven with God, that he has put that in our hearts, that desire to search. And the desire to search from a loving God implies that eventually it'll be fulfilled. And that's what we see. You know, I often used to think that maybe heaven was that total knowledge. And then along came the internet, and I thought, whoa, the internet is pretty close to heaven. Oh my goodness, it's still extremely limited. My prayer for you is that you'll continue to seek the wisdom and insight of God, that you'll let him work in your life as we work our ways closer and closer and closer to that full knowledge of what he has intended for us, his will for our lives, a knowledge of his love and how that affects us, a knowledge of his saving grace. May that all be yours. To God be the glory. Amen.